We'll get going with our next set of presentations, which I think you'll find highly exciting. What does one say about Jim Porter? It's Jim's wife, Jacqueline, who reached out to me on Facebook back in 2009 when I was only on for 3 months. Prior to this job, I had to get back on due to the social media being part of the JOB, which is fine. I'm not particularly fond of Facebook necessarily, but it is what it is. Was able to meet Jim and Jackie in 2010 at her invitation to come to the One Heart, which was the first time I ever viewed Swannanoa. Quite an impressive building, and impressive people I met over the years and developed relationships with that led to this unfolding, if you will. So Jim Porter is a 43-year veteran student who had the opportunity to work and live at the University of Science and Philosophy in the late 70s for about 2 years, the same years as John Bonsall, who is our second presenter today. He was invited to come there by Mrs. Russell after a short visit to Swannanoa. He is a graduate certificate holder of the home study course and is also the president of the first chartered International Age of Character Club out of Delaware. Not only that, he is also the chairman of the USP Alumni Committee and has been integral in the instrumentation of this conference's planning and all the work he did with the support of his beloved wife, Jacqueline, to get 3 trips down here prior to this to clean, organize, and help us set up a very nice display tomorrow in the warehouse. So without further ado, please welcome Jim Porter, who will be giving you a presentation on balance.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, there's that man that he described, and then there's me. You're going to get to deal with me. I need 3-dimensional things. 2-dimension, I struggle with. High tech, I struggle with. So I'm going to walk through this with you. This, to start with, Ramu asked me to bring this over this way. Is hanging in my living room, has been for many years. It's a constant reminder to me about the illusion of duality and how easy it is to get lost in it. You know that there's a single shaft turning up here in one direction only, yet we see a divided 2-way motion. This is what we constantly get lost in life. Continually get lost in life. It's not a bad thing. It makes all this possible. And I have marveled at the duality of life since I was a child, always seeking that within. Fulcrum. There it is. Simplicity itself. We believe that this is out of balance, yet we know from studying it's always balanced in the fulcrum, and there is no imbalance. The feminine, loosen this up a bit, gives over to the masculine. This could be a gift of service. Is that in balance? No. The masculine can give back to the feminine in construction and building and helping to create. Is that in balance? No. 2 opposites can become so, one or other can be so greedy and so visually angry with the other that we see destruction. Is that in balance? No. It's taking apart what we have worked to put together. So please keep that in mind as we go along. I find myself in life forgiving myself and others more than anything else. And I think that's the greatest path to getting where you need to go in enlightenment. I use models, and we'll go through them. My hope is to present in every aspect of this that one keyword, balance. I'm familiar with rhythmic, balanced interchange. but it's all for one purpose, to seek balance. I started off, remember my cousin John said that I was carrying a book, and I handed it to him. It was this book, Unit 1, 3rd edition, Meditation. And I went on to this book, Prayer, actively manifesting that which you want. I've read through every other book they have multiple times, and I always come back to these. This is how you do it. Decentrate inward with that desire that you have in prayer, and then manifest it. When I find myself lost, and boy do I get lost, my wife can attest to that, I fall back on these. That's not to say that the other books have no value. They do. They are simply multiplications of this. But when you're out there running with the science in the day-to-day life and you find yourself frustrated and tired, go back to meditation. There's working meditation, which I am excellent at because I seek to create balance in everything I do. And then there's meditation in increments throughout the day, which I'm not so good at, but I still try to do it. I will not give up on that. Oh, I would like to correct or add to something that John Bonsall said. He forgot to mention that when he walked through the room that morning with Lao in there, that she said to him, "John, I wish you could see the wave unfold and pass around you as you go through the room." Now, is that something you'd like to see? Yeah. I certainly would. Here's where I started. First page, first day, over 35, 36 years ago. Oh my God, it's longer than that. Over 4 decades ago. I sit down at a friend's house. Unit 1 is sitting on the table. It sat there for over an hour. I paid no attention to it. And then I got bored. I reached over, opened it, and this is the first thing I read. Meditation is the most important of all functions of human life which advance human progress. And I closed it. I went no further. I left, went on my way. I came back to the house several weeks later. She's out riding. I walk in, sit down at the kitchen table. Guess what book's sitting there? I open it up. Meditation is the most important of all functions of human life which advance human progress. Bing. It took 2 weeks for that seed to get planted and blossom. I had the privilege of walking many times around the mountain with Mrs. Russell. She was a master gardener. The first few weeks that I walked around with her, all I did was talk. And all she would do is, I'm not a fast walker, increase her pace to get further in front of me. I was in my 20s. Finally, after a little over a week, she said to me, she stopped and she turned. She puts her hands behind her back and she said, "Jim, I would like to just walk quietly if it's all right." So I got the message and I stopped talking. From that moment on, every time I walked with Mrs. Russell, she would walk along beside me or in front of me, never behind me. And she would go along and then she would stop and she would do this. And she would turn to me and she'd say, "You know, Jim," and say something. Okay, Mrs. Russell. She planted a seed. How'd she do it? She knew what I was thinking. Even though I shut my mouth, that brain was still going a mile a minute. And she would say something, and so often it would be something that I was thinking on, and I would think, oh. And she would plant the seed, and then we'd go on. Those seeds have been blossoming in my life nonstop ever since. And when they hit, they blow me away. So, it goes on to say, through meditation, every man can become whatever he wishes to become. That meditation is communion with God for the purpose of working knowingly with God. This also just stunned me because I had talked to God all my life, and many times I was not happy with God. I remember when I was in church as a child, a young child, we didn't go often, but we did go for those special occasions. And I'd go to Sunday school. And I met this man, or was told about this man named Jesus and his father God. And they were really nice people. They loved me. They wanted me to have happiness and joy in my life all the time. And I would go back and I would color their pictures in and have a great time doing it. And then at about the age of, I would say 10 or 11 or so, I moved upstairs to the main church. God changed. He was going to cast me into a fiery pit if I got out of line, and I would burn there forever. I'm like, I want to go back downstairs again. So I searched. And it wasn't until I became a father, and I read a lot of books. I'm a very slow reader. So when you hear me say I read a lot of books, it took a lot of time. But I got through them over the years, and the one thing that I kept struggling with is what I learned in that church, that God is out to get me. So I'd read more books trying to get to where I needed to go to understand what was wrong here. Then I met my wife. This is after I left the university. I'm still struggling. We're in the hospital one day. She's giving birth to a child. My child. 22 hours of labor. We almost lost him. The doctor was shaking his head. This little man appeared out of nowhere. Tiny little man. No mistaking the fact that he was Jewish and he was a doctor. He walks in, he takes these two devices off the table, look like highlight. You know what highlight is? Where they have, that's what they look like, made of metal. He inserts them inside of my wife, turns the child over, pulls it out, hands it to the nurse, silence. I immediately start to panic. Oh my God, he's dead. Nurse does something over there, and all of a sudden, that first breath hits and he wails. And he's wailing. And he's wailing. And she wraps him up. My wife is exhausted after 22 hours of this. He walks over, or she walks over, and she puts that child in my hands. The moment he hit my arms, he stopped crying. And I know they tell you that they can't see at that age, but that child looked right into my soul. And I knew God would never punish me because I could never punish that child. Never have. So that was the turning point for me. Then I went on to read about the power of prayer. This is still difficult for me because, as I said, getting into deep meditation in intervals I struggle with, even though I do it. My wife, she's amazing, not me. Maybe it's because I'm a Capricorn, which is an earth sign. Who knows? But when I began to really take this thought into my mind at meditation, it began to sink in, and that's this. Prayer is the mightiest of man's powers. For through prayer, if understood rightly and rightly used, and accompanied by action, man may have anything he desires, attain the loftiest heights, or extend his powers to others for their exaltation. Wow. Now, when you take that into meditation or carry it with you throughout the day, you begin to realize who you are and what you can do. I would find that as this awakened in me and people would ask me questions, that my mouth would open and say things I didn't even know I knew. You? And it would inspire people, and I would see changes in their lives, and I would realize, my God, the Russells are right. You can make a difference. Are you having a hard time hearing me? I'll try to talk up. Okay. So I continue to read, I continue to meditate, I continue to work for this message every way I can. From the time I was a child, I could think of nothing else to do in any situation but serve. That's all I want to do, is serve my fellow man, even the ones I disagree with, for they need it the most. This became one of my favorite books when I was down here. Your Day and Night, Dr. Russell's personal little book. It still is. I love it because I see the balance in every sentence in it. He takes you in and out, and in and out, and it's just a beautiful feeling. Let me read this from Salutation to the Day. Today is and will be, yesterday was and has been. My yesterday is what I made it. I see it in memory, perfect or imperfect. Now guys, this is me. I'm always looking, did I do well enough? And it needs to be all of us. Did I make it perfect? And if not, what? He goes on to say, if I rend the day, I build 10 other days, mayhap 10 times 10 to undo the rending. The Universal One will not allow this day to go on lived to the glory of Him who I am, nor to the fulfillment of His command, nor to the fulfillment of His purpose. There's the God I was looking for that I thought I lost when I walked upstairs. I have all the time in the world to fix it. And He is never going to be angry, He, she, Universal One, with me. And I will return here or somewhere else endlessly and have the privilege of knowing that. It goes on to say, I shall not deny that which shall give immortality to those who dwell in darkness and who reach out for the light. That's the biggest mistake most novices make when they find divinity within themselves. They want to go out and heal the world and everybody in it. How dare we? How dare we look at other souls that are not ready to listen to what we feel we have to give and impose on their progress? It's not a good thing to do. He points out that power is mine to give by the wayside. Is God limited? No. When you're doing healing work in your life, don't ever forget that. It's unlimited. I've seen people who have approached healing and think that they can pour their essence into those people. And all it does is discharge and disrupt your battery. And it backfires on you. But when you know that divinity is unlimited and endless, you can do what John talked about. Walk out and know that it's done. I've done healing work on people in my life that passed me in a car and never gave it another thought. To me, it's done. I don't have to hunt them down. If they're receptive, it's done. I'd like to move on a little bit about Mrs. Russell. One of my pet peeves in all my time with the Russells has been this doctor's better, Lao's better, philosophy's better, science is better. Catch the duality, the illusion of duality in that? We can't let it happen to us. Fight it. So when people hit me, of course I might lean a little bit in favoritism to Mrs. Russell because I wasn't privileged in this incarnation to meet Dr. Russell. I always go to the God will and his introduction, first paragraph of this magnificent woman. Oh, I've got it over here. I hope everyone's read this. If not, it's certainly worth reading again. To introduce one's own wife to the world naturally leads to a temptation of exaggeration. I feel myself immunized from that, however, by the impossibility of it. Pardon me. I feel that I can say without prejudice and quite free from the fact of her relation to me that hers is the greatest mentality I have ever known. That is saying much for me, for it has been my privilege to intimately know the greatest intellectuals of our time. Now, we've all read enough to know that he just knew about everybody that was anybody and placed her above them all. So I hope we can put, for some of us, that argument to rest, because as long as we do, we're dividing the work and we're not carrying it on whole. Science is the embodiment of philosophy made physical. Philosophy is the body of science made spiritual. There's one true direction of energy, and it's called love. It's in through gravitation to where the hole closes at the center in carbon, and it's out through magnetism. One direction, one force, one substance, light, which is love. And I'm not talking about, oh baby, I'm talking about universal love. It is not an emotion, it is a state of being. And we forget that. We should never forget that. We've also touched on the idea. Are you people familiar with the Lao Russell's Code of Ethics? Yes. I've read all the Code of Ethics, but this one jumps out to me. It jumps out to me because it empowers, in almost every word of it, you, the individual. It empowers you, the individual, to take that which you know to humanity, and in so doing, uplift them. In my still evolving philosophy, I see this. For me, God. In the beginning, God. This is how I remind myself. Then the individual working knowingly with God. That individual working knowingly with God inspires the family, who can go out into the community working knowingly with God. That individual working knowingly with family, community, state and county, or country can inspire, because they're in it, can inspire the state, county, and country to what divinity is, and ultimately the world. And I would like to show a small example of that. This has been in the news. I called it. Maybe you folks have too. Right here. Anybody familiar with this gentleman?
It's Russian.
Yes, he is. I cannot pronounce his name. Vasily Alexandrov. Thank you. This gentleman was one of 3 officers on a submarine in 1962, was it, when we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. The word came down from the Kremlin that he and the other 2 officers were to fire a nuclear torpedo at our Navy to break the blockade that we had there. President Kennedy had set it up. The other 2 officers immediately said yes, but the chain of command required 3 to say yes. This man said no. We wouldn't be sitting here today. We'd have been in thermal nuclear war. One man in the right spot at the right time literally saved humanity. I didn't know this until 2 weeks ago. It blew my mind. You never know when your opportunity to do something massive will come up. In the meantime, do everything you can as you are where you are, and don't ever think it insignificant. You never know where those ripples will lead and who they will inspire. Someone inspired this man at some point in his life to say, this is nuts. No. I love him. Never met him. Oh, by the way, a small side. He's an Aquarian. Any astrologers in the room? What do Aquarians want to do, Richard? They want to...
It's an air sign, and I think they want balance.
Yeah, exactly. They want to tear down and rebuild the old structures, and they want to save the world. Wow. If that wasn't enough kick for me right there, this guy turns out to have the same birthday as my youngest son. Exactly the same. A few years difference. I swear to God, the day my son was leaving home to move to Missouri, we live in Pennsylvania, I turned to him, I said, Nathan, what do you want to do when you get out there? Dad, I want to save the world. I said, good luck with that. All right, Jeremy touched on this beautifully when he read the first 2 pages of the Universal One. I am a major fan of it. When anybody asks me, right off the top of my head, what they can do, I tell them, or give them, I have printed this out many times, the first 2 pages of the Universal One. It says it all to me. I'm not going to put you through reading it all again, but I am going to do what Leo used to tell me to do when I finished one of the books. Read it again. So bear with me a minute while I read a couple paragraphs again. God is not one and the universe another. The universe is not a separate creation of God's. It is God. There is no created universe. Nothing has been created. There is no creating universe. There is a creating universe, this is a creating universe, not a created one. Then he went on to say this. The first time I read this, I'm still struggling with understanding the concept that I am divinity. I'm quite comfortable in making that a long trip. But I find that I need to remind myself of this often. It goes this way for me. God is all there is. Beyond God, there is nothing. Superior to God, there is nothing. Inferior to God, there is nothing. Opposed to God, there is nothing. Gosh, what a relief. Opposed to God, there is nothing. You can let it all go, guys. It's okay. So if There's nothing opposed to God, and nothing inferior to God, and nothing superior to God, and nothing beyond God. And God is all there is. Who are we?
God.
God. Here's the, what do you call it, the disclaimer. To the degree that we know we are. That took a lot of weight off my shoulders too. Got all the time in the world to get there. What I'm hoping I'm doing here is showing the balance that is in us, always, and that we're going to get off balance, and we're going to make mistakes, and that we need to put that guilt away and stop carrying it around and stop thinking less of ourselves. If I accomplish nothing else in my remaining years on this planet, I want to accomplish that. No guilt. Circuit of Light. Have you, how many people here have read The Secret of Light and the home study course? Have you seen this symbol? It's, just pick any two, pick any two octaves of the wave. 1, 2. That's the love principle. Love in, out, in, out. It's divided in every cycle. I'm sorry. It carries through it all. It divides it all. The inert gases, this is where Christ consciousness resides. It is the bridge between the universal one and the embodied us. Its purpose is to record everything, void everything, and then repeat it as it's recorded. If that didn't happen, the illusion would be gone. I love the illusion. For me, if you notice the balancing lines that go through here and down, this took me back to church as a boy. Suddenly one day I saw Jacob's ladder, the quick way to heaven. Wow. It's all in there. You'll notice, forgive me, you'll notice that the inert gases, with the exception of the first one and the last, are not dead center on the line. They're offside. Otherwise, they couldn't perform their function. They would be universal one. It's that little bit, one way or the other, which balances itself out throughout the 9 octaves of the wave, that makes the difference. You cannot disturb divinity. You will not move that fulcrum. In the Bible, when Jesus walked on the water, what was he doing? He was walking on the fulcrum between the waves. What did he do? That's the storm of life, if you want the parable. He went out before the disciples who were fearful of the wave and that they would be crushed and destroyed by it. He went to the strongest among them at that moment, which was Peter, and he said to Peter, "Step into the inert gas with me, to the fulcrum of the wave. Get out of the boat. Look at me." And when Peter looked at the vine reflected back at him, he walked toward him. And then what did he do? He looked away. Down he went. He panicked. Jesus said, "Focus, look back on me." Up he came. Now there's a lesson for life for me. I'm always looking away. And then I start to panic. And then I pick these books up and listen to the seeds that Leo planted in my mind. And I'm made whole. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because I know I'm running out of time. The final thing I would like to touch on, let me pull this apart. You are familiar with what this is. Cube, square, cube, circles. I'm going to take these out. People see this and they think, oh, divinity. It represents divinity at zero, the universal one, but it's not complete. This completes it. Creation. We want to see these two as two separate things. And the Russells constantly write they're not two separate things. This is eternally still. This is eternally in motion. This never began and never ended. This never began and never ended. They are both eternal. So can we put them together the way they belong? I and my Father are one, eternally, creating forever. One. Now you can back up what I just said to you in the Secret of Light. See if I can find it here for you. Oh, let me throw this little tidbit in before I do that. I got a couple more minutes. You know where the Russells say that all illuminates knew the science and know the science throughout history? Even Jesus, remember? I have many things yet to tell you, but you cannot bear it yet. Well, this poor illuminate, I believe it was Paul from Revelations, am I right? Here's his description of heaven. And the city lieth foursquare, and the length is as great as the breadth. The length is as great as the breadth. And he measured the city with a reed, 12,000 furlongs, length, breadth, and depth. Heaven is a cube. He couldn't tell the people of his day, so he put it encoded in the Bible so that everyone who became aware of this throughout history would see it there. All right. So let me finish up, please, by saying that there are many people here in this room and others that are so gifted with the ability to absorb knowledge and hold it and repeat it beautifully and teach. I'm not that person. I struggle to get a concept into my mind. But thank God, once it's there, it's there. And the thing I have fallen down or back on, ever as I told you in the beginning, is I always fall back on, when I don't know what to do, how can I serve? That's what we are all doing. We're serving humanity by spreading this word. Thank you. Is there any questions that anyone would have of me?
Jim, I wanted to thank you for clarifying that Jesus story for me, because, with the water and everything, because I thought Jesus was just showing off the whole time. Thank you.
Maybe he was, John. All right, well, good. Because if you got too deep into the science, I was going to have to throw you over to John anyway. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim.